Ukrainian President Zelenskyy just took the dagger and put it right into the heart of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin's plan to try to set a trap in Geneva. Zelenskyy, joined by the UK and France, smoked out what Donald Trump and Putin were trying to do. You see, yesterday and today, there are trilateral negotiations that are taking place in Geneva between Russia, the United States, and Ukraine. Donald Trump and Putin wanted to use this to pressure Zelenskyy to give up all of Donbass and most of eastern Ukraine. They were preparing to gang up on Zelenskyy, corner him, corner his negotiators, and say, give up eastern Ukraine right now or else, and then list numerous threats. Zelenskyy saw what was happening. He called up his friends in Europe. He called up the UK. He called up France, and their delegation showed up, and they were not originally invited to even be there. And UK representatives, French representatives, some European Union representatives showed up and said, what? You're not going to let us in here? If you don't let us in here, then there's no valid negotiation taking place. Ukraine is Europe, Europe is Ukraine, and there can be no deal unless Europe is here. And then we saw what the plan was. Russia had a new negotiator who was at the table, who brought all of his fake history books to say, you see, all of eastern Ukraine and Ukraine in general belongs to Russia. There should be no peace deal at all because the only peace that exists is Ukraine fully submitting. Not to mention that before this meeting took place in Geneva, before these negotiations took place, Russia struck Ukraine with some of the worst ballistic missiles and Shahed drone strikes that we've seen since the war began. They hit 12 regions, 400 drones, almost 30 missiles. At least 3 people were killed. That was right before the Geneva negotiations. The trilateral was set to take place. Then right after the trilateral took place, Russia began the day with 29 missiles of various types, trying to strike Ukraine. Again, unfortunately, 25 were shot down. It was a barrage of Russian missiles, Russian Shahed drones. This is how it's described by Dennis Schleiderman. The delegations from the UK and France joined the talks between Russia, the US, and Ukraine in Geneva without being invited. I think this really messed up the plans to quickly sort everything out behind Europe's back and push for the annexation of Donbass, which is obviously what the US and Russian delegates were planning to do. London and Paris made it clear, no agreements about Europe without Europe. It's an extremely important show of support and a demonstration of their position. Zelenskyy also posted the following message himself. In the massive strike with which Russians began the day, he talks about how Ukraine was successful in knocking down a lot of these missiles. It's an important result for our air defense, and once again, we emphasize that air defense is a daily necessity. I thank all of our partners who understand this. By the way, that's referring to the fact that the U.S. doesn't understand this. Russia greets with a strike even the very day new formats begin in Geneva, trilateral and bilateral with the United States. This very clearly shows what Russia wants and what it's truly intent on. Almost 400 drones launched as well. Later today, there will be a report from the delegation following the first round of talks in Geneva. The team absolutely must raise the issue of these strikes, first of all, with the American side, which proposed that both Ukraine and Russia refrain from attacks. Ukraine is ready. We do not need war, and we always act symmetrically, defending our state and our independence. Likewise, we're ready to move quickly toward a just agreement to end the war. The only question is for the Russians. What do they want? And also whether there will be consequences for Russia for the fact that the Shahed missiles and fantasy chatter about history matter more to them than real diplomacy and lasting peace. And the whole time you have Donald Trump, like when he was on Air Force One the other day, threatening Ukraine. He's saying Ukraine better come to the table fast. Ukraine better do this. Ukraine better do that. Ukraine's at the table. Ukraine's agreeing to a ceasefire. Ukraine's agreeing to elections. Ukraine's agreeing to a referendum to also give up portions of Donbass and to give up portions of eastern Ukraine. All Ukraine is saying is we need a ceasefire, a real lasting ceasefire, and then we can have our people be able to vote and to be able to make this determination, self-determination, sovereignty. I can't unilaterally give up the remainder of Donbass. Zelenskyy says, what would my people think of me? And what would the people think of being Ukrainian in general?
The older I get, the more I find myself wanting to be more intentional about the way I live, eat, and take care of my body. MOSH, which you may have heard about on Oprah's Favorite Things, was founded by Maria Shriver and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger with a simple mission: to create a conversation about brain health through food, education, and research. Maria's father suffered from Alzheimer's, and since then she and Patrick have dedicated themselves to finding ways to help other families dealing with this debilitating disease. MOSH joined forces with the world's top scientists and functional nutritionists to go beyond your average protein bar. Each MOSH bar is made with ingredients that support brain health, like ashwagandha, lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s, plus a game-changing brain-boosting ingredient you won't find in any other bar. MOSH is the first and only food brand boosted with Cognizin, a premium nootropic that supplies the brain with a patent form of cytokine. MOSH bars also actually taste great and come in 9 mouth-watering flavors, including 3 new plant-based flavors: chocolate chip cookie, hazelnut chocolate chip, and peanut butter chocolate chip. But here's the best part: to make you feel good, MOSH also donates a portion of all proceeds from your order to fund gender-based brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. Why gender-based? Well, 2/3 of Alzheimer's patients are women. MOSH is working closely to close the gap between women and men's health research. I'm truly a huge fan of MOSH and their mission. Plus, it's a huge bonus that peanut butter chocolate chip MOSH bar tastes delicious. Trust me, I won't steer you wrong. You have to try it. If you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and your brain, MOSH bars are the perfect choice for you. Head to moshlife.com/Meidas to save 20% off plus free shipping on the bestsellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers trial pack or the plant-based trial pack at moslife.com/Meidas.
Zelenskyy gave this interview to Axios, where he said Ukrainian people will reject any peace deal that involves Ukraine unilaterally withdrawing from eastern Donbass. And this new negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, he just showed up to try to stall and to try to blow this up. And all he does is philosophize about their own historical roots. It's like Trump's meandering, psychotic speeches where Trump's like, this is how you make America great again. Medinsky's like, this is how you make Russia great again. This is our land. This is our territory. And Zelensky's like, look, you want to talk about troop withdrawal? I'm down to talk about it. Why don't we freeze the current battle lines where they are? Why would we give up areas that Russia's unable to conquer? Because the moment that we give up those battle lines, they're going to use it to then go further and further into Ukraine. They're going to use that which they can't conquer through military means, in order to then rearm, build up its forces, and then go again on the offensive. That's why we need real security guarantees. Zelenskyy says it's not fair that Trump kept publicly calling on Ukraine and not Russia to make concessions. And his conversations with Kushner and Witkoff don't involve that kind of pressure that he says Trump is now using in public. He's like, what the hell are you even trying to do? Here's what he's referring to. Here's what Trump said aboard Air Force One. Here, play this clip.
You're going to have Ukraine talks tomorrow as well in Geneva with Witkoff and Jared Kushner.
Yeah.
What are you expecting there? Is there
the big talks? It's going to be very easy. I mean, look, so far, Ukraine better come to the table fast. That's all I'm telling you. We are in a position. We want them to come in.
And Zelenskyy made it very clear in Munich. Ukraine's ready for a deal that brings real peace to Ukraine and Europe. Here, play this clip.
Dear friends, Ukraine is ready for a deal that brings real peace to us, to Ukraine, to Europe. And I'm confident that this war can be ended and ended with dignity. This is the most important for us.
But he says Putin's like Hitler. You can't do a deal with Hitler. Really? You think that you can do a deal with the modern day Hitler? Here, play this clip.
And it seems Putin hopes to repeat Munich, and not Munich 2007, when they only spoke about dividing Europe, but Munich 1938, when previous Putin began dividing Europe in reality. It would be an illusion to believe that this war can now be reliably ended by dividing Ukraine, just as it was an illusion to believe that sacrificing Czechoslovakia would save Europe from a great war.
And then Zelenskyy talked about in Munich this idea of concessions. You want this concession, that concession. America turns to concessions, but what about security guarantees? And why is it always Ukraine give when we've given everything? Russia hasn't given one concession. Here, play this clip.
The Americans often return to the topic of concessions. And too often those concessions are discussed in the context only of Ukraine, not Russia. Europe is practically not present at the table. It's a big mistake to my mind. And it is, I think we Ukrainians who are trying to bring Europe fully into the process so that Europe's interests and voice.
And I think here is one of the most important lines that Zelenskyy gave in Munich. And then I'll just show you one other thing where he said, you see, Putin sees himself as a czar, but in reality, he's a slave to war. And could you imagine Putin with no war? His very existence is based on war and killing people. And here's what Zelenskyy has to say. Here, play this clip.
He may see himself as a Tsar, but in reality, he is a slave to war. And if he lives another 10 years, we can understand it can be, war can return or expand. That is why we say there must be real security guarantees.
Now, as I mentioned, the French delegation showed up in Geneva, thankfully. And here's what French President Macron previewed what the French delegation was going to do. Play this clip.
As all the allies, we have to be the one to negotiate this new architecture of security for Europe the day after, because our geography will not change. We will live with Russia at the same place and the Europeans at the same place. And I don't want this negotiation to be organized by somebody else.
More from French President Emmanuel Macron right here as well. Let's play this clip right here.
One day Russians will have to reckon with the enormity of the crime committed in their name, with the futility of the pretexts, and the devastating longer-term effects on their country. But until that time comes, we will not lower the guard.
And as Barak Ravid explains, two sources with knowledge told me that negotiations in the political group in Geneva got stuck today. The sources said the reason was that the positions presented by the new Russian chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, made it impossible to have any discussions. As our editor-in-chief, Ron Filipkowski, says, this comes less than 24 hours after Trump once again said Ukraine was the problem. Now, Ukraine working with Europe. Europe is Ukraine. Ukraine is Europe, putting on a united front and making it very clear that Europe is fully united. They won't bend, they won't break, they won't be ripped apart by the United States. I think that was a critical move. Also, this is now connected with Canada. This is connected with Australia. This is now connected, there. I think that's very important as well to point out. And I mean, you really have what appear, the alliances are clear, right? It's US and Russia. Sickening, but that's what it is. And it was Ukraine, Europe, Canada, Australia, basically together right there. So we'll keep you posted every step of the way. But that's where we're at right now. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million. And thanks everybody for watching.
New Meidas merch. Head to store.meidastouch.com today and get yourself the best pro-democracy gear and show your support. That's store.meidastouch.com.